So this session is called Practicing Cooperation, Sustaining Us, Sustaining Our Movement. My name is Suparna Kudesi, and I work at an organization called COFED, which is the Cooperative Food Empowerment Directive. I'm here with my colleague Paulina, who has helped build some of the content you'll be seeing today. And if you look on your tables, you will see a little one-pager about us if you're interested in learning more. Essentially, what we do at COFED is we are a national organization that works with young, queer, trans, Black, Indigenous people of color in either starting or scaling up their food or land-based co-ops around the country. And we do it through programming, through education work, and providing leadership and technical assistance, as well as through re-granting of funds. So if you are doing that work here in San Diego or beyond and are interested in learning more, please check our website out. Please hit us up, say hi. All right, so I want to know who's in the room, and I'd love for you to talk with each other a bit. So for the next 5 minutes, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and share a response that you are writing in front of you with the sticky notes provided to share who you are. Before I do that, since more people are coming in, hi, welcome. I'm Suparna. I use she, they pronouns. I was born and raised in India, but I've lived in San Diego for the last 8 years. My interest in co-ops has come from growing up and being exposed to co-ops as a way of life. And in the US, when I got here, it was confusing to me why more people didn't just live that way, and why more people didn't just cooperate to meet our needs, because that's what my people did. That's how we got our food, that's how we got our caregiving, that's how we took care of our elders, that's how we took care of our kids, that's how we fed each other, that's how we celebrated. So it was a bit confusing when I got here why we were not doing things more cooperatively. I found my way to COFED as an educator. So I'm a teacher by training, and I wanted to do education work for cooperatives. And when I found COFED, we were only working on campuses with young people who wanted to start campus-based co-ops. And since then, we've moved into the community. So what we more often than not find is people who are really interested in building co-ops or are already in co-ops, but come to us when they feel burnt out, when they feel tired, when they feel hurt, and when they feel like they're needing a little bit more direction on how to keep cooperating together despite all these things. Something keeps bringing us back to these ways of being. So I would love to hear from you all, and for you to hear from each other. The question I have for you is, share a recent experience where you felt a strong sense of cooperation. And I'd like you to think about what values were present. So if you attended the morning co-op track with my facilitating, the panel that we had of the 3 different co-ops here in San Diego, you might have heard a lot about values. So if there was a value that you have, your own personal value, that came through when you felt that sense of cooperation, I'd love for you to think about it, write it down on a sticky note, and then think about how that value connected to your feeling of cooperation. For instance, I'm a mother, and I recently felt an immense sense of cooperation when my 2 children were not yelling at each other and playing for 2 minutes straight. I enjoyed it. The value that I have in our family is love. And I felt like my value of love and our collective value of love really came through in the way that they were behaving or cooperating or continuing to just engage with each other with that sense of love. So I'd like you to do that kind of reflection on your own. Take 1 minute to write it down on the sticky notes provided at your table. And then we'll take 4 minutes to introduce yourself to the people next to you and share your response. And if you already know each other, maybe you can switch it up and find somebody at the table you don't already know. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I can raise your hands and I'll come clarify. So I'm going to call you back in 5 minutes. How did that feel? Did you feel that there's a sense of cooperation that we already have? That we may actually have an understanding of cooperation in our bodies, in our lives, regardless of whether we're in co-ops or not? Okay, show of hands. Who's in the room? Raise your hands if you are part of a co-op currently. Raise your hands if you'd like to be part of a co-op. Raise your hands if you've been burned while being in a co-op or hurt while being in a co-op. All right. So if you look around the room, there are lots of us who have some experience with co-op, who have either started one or have been in one, who are in one, who have the desire to be in one. So really this session is about cooperation in practice. And what's really important for us to think about is what would happen today if things were different. So humor me for a second. If you wouldn't mind just closing your eyes or leaving them open, gently looking at a quiet spot in front of you, and visualize this. We have won the revolution. Capitalism and all structures that oppress us are gone. There is plenty for all of us because there has always been plenty for all of us. Systems that hurt us and life on this planet, of work, of caregiving, of education, of business, of art, are gone. There is no more war because there is no longer the need to establish our supremacy on someone else. What comes in its place? What do we have the muscle to actually build and retain in its place? What would cooperation look and feel like in that space? Please bring yourselves back in this room. If your eyes are closed, I invite you to open them. What emerged for you all? If you don't mind participating, raising your hands, sharing out, what came up for you in that visualization? Did we have the muscles? Did we have the practice? Did we have systems that corresponded to those muscles being exercised?
Right now I'm kind of pessimistic because of national political currents and then the economic trajectory of this country. The long-term trends in this country are very bad. And I feel that if the dominant institutions and policies were to collapse, very ugly things would fill their place. So I think that we have a lot of great ideas, but I don't think we're strong enough currently. And I don't think there's not enough knowledge of alternative systems and institutions for a more democratic or equitable society to emerge at the present time. So I think there's a lot of work that has to be done, and right now I'm a bit pessimistic, but I'm here because I still have hope.
I'm here for your pessimism and your hope. Anybody else feeling that?
I think I kind of experienced that visualization in a more experiential way of seeing myself just like, just existing with other people with a really low level of stress where we just are at the same level and equal and really grounded. So that was cool.
Yeah, we could be vibing. Yes, Julia? Kelly.
Can you hear me?
You can.
I had a vision of love and unity and harmony. That was my vision. And I do have hope.
Okay. I have hope too. That's why I'm here too. And I'm excited. But you shared does sound like a barrier. It definitely sounds real. And I think a lot of us have experienced that those barriers are real. So what I'm about to share, or give you a chance to share, and a little bit of what we'll be doing together today, is thinking about what it means to build that muscle of hope, or build that muscle of cooperative resilience. And really recognizing that building our cooperative muscle doesn't just mean having a goal of something. So for instance, I want to go to the gym, I want to be able to bench these many pounds, and I want to be able to lift this much. And I do it with that as my goal. But building our cooperative resilience or building our cooperative muscle is kind of like you go to the gym every day, you practice getting stronger so that when you hit a challenge, like hurting your shoulder, you still have a habit of being strong. You still have this internalized resilience to be able to see what is a challenge and how can you face it. And to be able to recognize that some barriers are external to you. They don't have to do with your shoulder. They have to do with who designed the machine. They have to do with how the gym is designed. Is it accessible to your body? So as we think about this, the next prompt I have for you is, what's holding us back? So some of you said you wanted to start a co-op. What's stopping you from doing that today?
Time and resources to do things outside of like work within a capitalistic society.
Absolutely, especially if your co-op is not at the moment viable to be your job yet. Yes.
I think when we partner in any way, there has to be like ground rules so that, you know, to avoid a lot of conflict, and trying to figure that out ahead of time before everyone gets, you know, invested in this or that aspect of the work is super important. And also, I think people are more likely to agree to certain rules before they've waded into the work. So it's, to me, it's something that you have to get right from the start, ideally. Can't always work that way, but if you have the luxury of time and intelligence to figure it out and, you know, anticipate what may happen, that would be smart, but it takes a lot of effort.
It does.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you came to this session, because when we often talk about common needs or common agreements or community agreements, I would say they actually come from a place of needs, and needs inform our values. And so this is the space where we're going to tinker a little bit with values and what that could look like. So I invite you to be playful for the next hour together. And then I saw your hand go up one more time. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I was going to say trauma. It holds me back from starting. Yeah, trauma. I was going to say trauma.
Absolutely. Trauma. Yes.
Expectations, you know, find it's like a build on finding partners, but folks who have the same values and expectations as you, that's challenging.
Absolutely. And so it is about building your collective muscles. It's about really saying, we're going to bench together. We're going to go road this machine together. And we have to be aligned with what that looks like. So will the grocery co-op in San Diego save the world tomorrow? No. But when systems will collapse and change, because I do believe we are in late-stage capitalism, then we have grocery co-ops and land-based co-ops and childcare co-ops and education co-ops that are practicing how to be governing of ourselves, how to actually produce things in a way that doesn't dehumanize us, it doesn't take away our dignity. And those are the kinds of skills we're going to need for this next tomorrow. I see your request, thank you. And you're absolutely right. Some of these are very real systemic things. Needing to go have a job, or having the resources to talk about your values, or actually be able to go start a co-op in your spare time is a luxury. And these systems are not accidental. what we are experiencing currently, right now in the world, is a polycrisis. There's lots of stuff happening. In this moment, thinking cooperatively might feel like a luxury. It might feel like a privilege. But I really do believe that some of this is deeply internal and we know it. So really, it's an act of remembering with what we already know. And there's this internalized stuff. I'm not arguing that trauma is not external, but there are also internalized feelings or beliefs or values that we have that help us or stop us from moving cooperatively. And it's really easy sometimes to blame systems. But even within cooperative spaces, we fall back on institutionalized ways of doing things. And even in cooperative spaces, we can feel a lack of trust, oppression, harm, boredom, exhaustion, and even exploitation. So the question we will be discussing in a little bit, I will stop talking soon, is what will it take to shift? And really thinking about becoming more comfortable with cooperation as a lifestyle. It may not be that the entity type you work for is a legalized cooperative, but you can still inform the way you work in whichever kind of setup you work or you live in to move more cooperatively. And for that, like we've talked about, I think we need values. Because values really help shine the light on how we're going to move in this world. So it's not just what you will do, but really how you will do it. So before we go into our activity, I wanted to share a little bit about COFED's values. So at COFED, we have 8 values that we have co-created as a team. We came to these values by asking one question at our team meetings, which was, what do you like about working at COFED? Why do you want to keep coming back? And we generated a list of things that we like to do, or how we feel, or how it feels to work at COFED. And then from there, we did a value-based exercise, which led us to highlight the recurring theme. And as we came to these values, what we realized was that everything we did, we really wanted to keep coming back to our values. And we came up with the values together. But our values were not just what we were going to do, but also how we did everything. So we started creating benchmarks to see, were we actually living by our values or doing the work according to our values? And I believe that like naming your values is one thing, but then actually practicing or being in your values is another. And this comes back to like actually creating cooperative habits that build our cooperative muscles so that we don't fall back into institutionalized patterns of being with one another. I know I've talked a lot, so I'm going to send you off into your groups right now. I wanted to introduce you all to this framework. I call it the Cooperative Cultural Element Framework, and it stands for co-op. And the C is collaboration, ownership, operations, and power. I apologize that in Spanish it doesn't translate exactly to the right letters. But I wanted to just share a little bit about this framework and how values connect to it. So as you're thinking about values in your to-be co-op or your current co-op or your past co-op experiences, I'd like you to think about whichever value you have or you would like to think about with the framework of this co-op model. So really you want to be thinking about if your value is, can someone give me a value that they have in their life? Trust, thank you. If your value is trust, then how does it show up in your collaborations? How does trust show up in ownership? And you can interpret ownership from a pure cooperative way of one vote, one voice, or you can interpret it in terms of like who is owning the actual product or produce or the goods or the processes or the profit. Or you could take it as accountability. Does trust show up in your ownership, in your collaborative? How are your operations designed, and are you moving with trust in your operations internally? Who is making decisions? How are those decisions made? Are they made on the foundation of trust, or with the intention of building trust? And then finally, power. More of a power with rather than a power over, and really thinking about how would trust show up in the way that you experience or exert your power, or you feel your power with other people in your organization or your collaborative or your cooperative. I'm going to pause for questions very soon, but I just want to keep moving just for time. So for the activity that we're about to do, and we're going to spend the next 30 minutes doing this, maybe a little bit less than 30 minutes, there are 4 steps. And what you're going to jump into right now is actually an exercise in practicing your cooperative values. For the sake of this exercise and for all of us spending our time together, I'd like you to choose a value from the list of COFED's values. Each of you will get, each table will get a list of the list of the values, as well as directions for what's going to happen. So if you are already at a table that has a big chart paper that says either one of the COOP words, either collaboration, operations, ownership, or power, then you will get a corresponding instruction sheet. And the first step is each person at your table. So individually, you will choose a value. So you could choose accountability, you could choose love, you could choose joy, and you will basically, from the lens of that particular value, you will look at a problem. And each table will get a different problem. And it's a real life problem that could happen to any one of us in our workspace. And then as a group, you will first, actually the second step is you'll first think about it from your value on how you would solve the problem. For instance, you are supporting a mentee on a project. You're onboarding them, and they're supposed to lead this project. And it's been 2 months, you've been supporting them, you've been giving them lots of templates, blueprints on how to do things, and then they start to feel like they're getting burnt out. They start to feel really tired. And you respond with love, because that's one of your values. You respond with thinking about their joy, because that's also one of your values. And you start giving them a lot of support. And then they say, it's too much support, please back off. So then, again, you change in how you respond to them. But essentially what you're thinking about is if your value was efficiency, if your value was urgency, then you would move differently in that situation. And sometimes 2 values can clash. There's nothing wrong with urgency as a value. You could be performing such a service in the world where you have to move with urgency, and that's okay. There's no judgment about that. But really thinking about what's the value and how would you approach this problem from that particular lens. So just going back to the directions, you'll get some time to first individually brainstorm on your sticky note what your solution would be from your particular value. Then you would discuss as a group. So all of you at the table should only be looking at one. So I'm going to actually take this one away. You should only have one big chart paper on your table. Thank you. And the whole exercise is to actually see the trade-offs that happen when you have so many values, but then you have to solve the same problem. And then finally, you're going to write down your solution in the sticky notes, you're going to have a discussion, and you'll stick your sticky notes on the chart paper. For the purpose of this exercise, I thought it would be easy to give you COFED's values, which are love, accountability, humanity, impact, joy, collective liberation, cooperation, and rest. But if you have your own value that you'd like to bring in, you can also bring that in. We're going to take about 20 minutes to do this activity. So I'd love to hear back. We only have about 20 minutes left in the session. I'd love to hear back a little bit about how that was for you, any nuggets that came out. I heard some feedback about how patriarchy was not mentioned as a barrier or as a system. I think that's really important to think about how capitalism is connected to racism, to anti-blackness, to genocide, to colonialism, to systems of supremacy, to ableism. And then really thinking about how the values, whichever value you pick, if you want to exist, or you want to create, or you want to move more cooperatively, whichever values you pick kind of have to be in alignment with cooperation, or moving collaboratively, or moving cooperatively in whichever system you're thinking about. So I'd love to hear some nuggets. I'm going to take 5 minutes. Please don't be shy. If you are willing to share even a little bit in whichever language, it would be wonderful to hear from you. Anything that came up at your table, anything that came up in your discussions, would love to hear a little bit more. Yes, thank you. And if you can share which value you picked, and then also which was the cooperative cultural element that was your table.
Our element is operations, and our problem was that our teammates were showing signs of stress and burnout, and we don't have mental health support, and we had to support well-being without increasing costs. And one of the things that my team members were coming up with that resonated with me, or that was an aha moment, was designing the structure around the humans rather than trying to get people to mold. So really talking to them. One of our team members was focusing on collective liberation and really talking. Her idea was to talk with the people and understand their background and how to model the workplace around them in a way that would be different for multiple people. So I really like that. And then also at a human-to-human level, asking people about their basic needs, and then letting people bring joy, their own joy, to the group was also powerful. So,
thank you. Speaking of joy, how cool is that party happening in next door, huh? That's so fun. I want to be there right now. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Even if it's another operations, that's fine. But maybe I'll just skip to power real quick and come back to operations. Go ahead.
So in our scenario, it's a new employee has come into like the workplace, and they feel that they're not receiving the same amount of respect as people have been there for longer. And so with my value for like collective liberation, that one I was like, dang it, should have picked another one. Because I was like, okay, so what I garnered from this in terms of interpreting the problem is that they feel that they have to put in more time in order to earn the same level of respect, which it's not going to happen when you get to a workplace at first, because you're there and you're going to have to basically put in the years till you do that. So for collective liberation, it's the thought process of how do we liberate them from that like need to put in the time in order to deserve respect. And so one thing I suggested, which this is just something we do at my workplace, and so it's got a silly name. They're called Warm and Fuzzies. And so basically like every couple of months, basically we all get together and we all get like a bunch of cards, and we have to give each other compliments on what we think each other does well in the workplace, what are your accomplishments, and taking the time to really recognize each other for what everyone does. And since this is like 30 people, usually we get a couple of weeks to write these out, but it's just a nice way to show that like even if you're not like thinking about it, like some of the most random people that you don't even talk to are recognizing you for what you do and what you provide to the workplace. And it's just like a nice form of encouragement. So, yeah.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
We had another operations, and so I think one of the commonalities was that we tried to think, I think we were kind of inherently thinking of some of the conflicts that could arise, which you also mentioned as well. And so as the operations, you know, I mentioned mutual aid, some other people mentioned that as well. We talked about forming committees, basically having a way that we can address these things within operation through consensus, and being mindful of the differing needs that people have, the different needs they come to the organization with, the differing challenges they face. So that's one thing that stuck out in my head too, is just the need from an operational perspective to think of things more as a collective. And also, when I was thinking of everybody talking, I was also thinking, well, in what ways can some of these things conflict with one another as well at times? The idea of joy, somebody mentioned the idea of joy when somebody's dealing with stress and burnout. Obviously, there's not much joy when you feel stress and burnout. So, yeah, that's one thing that came to mind.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think this is the main point, is that sometimes you can have values and sometimes they work together, and sometimes you can have warm and fuzzies and they can actually work, and sometimes you might have a value that conflicts with that. So how do we keep moving in a way that our values stay aligned with each other? Because when you don't have values that actually align with cooperation, and again, some of these values can be great. It doesn't have to be a bad value. It just can be a value that does not align with cooperation necessarily. So for instance, you could have efficiency, competition, individualism, scarcity, speed of production, or profit maximization. So as you're thinking about this, as you leave this room, I invite you to think about some values that you have that are aligned with cooperation. Wherever you work, wherever you're planted, wherever you're organizing, if you can think about some values that are already in practice that actually move cooperation as a strengthening, as a muscle forward, make it stronger, keep doing those things. And then reflect on the things that are not in alignment, that feel like there's a contradiction there. And as we end this session, I'd love for you to, while you're doing this on a different sticky note, I'm going to come around and take your big pieces of paper and stick them on the wall. But what I would love for you to do is, on your own, write one takeaway or commitment related to your own values and how you can strengthen them in your workplace or wherever you're planted. And how can you build that cooperative muscle? Just one takeaway or one action item that you are thinking. And then please share that with the person next to you. So again, take about 3 minutes for the entirety of this. I'm going to come around and take your big pieces of paper. Think about this as something you can take back with you, be reminded of your values, something you can do, something you can share with your team when you go back to work or to your life. And then now's a good time to start sharing with the person next to you as sort of like an external accountability tool. Before you leave the room, if you could take a look at what folks have mentioned here, there's some really neat stuff. So y'all came here today, hopefully with some sort of understanding of co-ops and thinking about what makes our co-ops stronger, what could make our co-ops stronger. And I'm here to tell you it's actually really simple. And I know it's hard sometimes because it's hard to keep hopeful and be hopeful in the kind of world we're living in right now. But I personally think the work that we do, we work with young folks, and I feel like there's so much potential. There's so much potential for change. And people have a lot of amazing ideas. And we all have a role to play in this movement. Some of us might be caregivers. Some of us might be obstruction removers. Some of us maybe get out of the wayers. We all have a role to play, and I really hope that you find your role and move with your values. But the real flex, like the real power of values, is to actually put them into action and keep testing them. The co-op framework is just one way to test to see if your values are actually making a co-op stronger or the cooperative movement stronger. And you can find your own framework, you can have your own values, but keep testing them to see if they're really getting stronger and you are getting stronger. Because when you get stronger as individuals and we all get stronger, we get to sustain us, but then we also get to build a stronger movement. I hope that you keep staying hopeful despite all of the messiness of the world. And if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. You can say them out loud, or you can ask me privately, or thoughts. I'd love to hear more. And if you would like to learn more about co-fed services, contact us and we can see what we can do to support you. We work nationally, so we could support your co-op or your idea for a co-op and then take it onwards. Thank you for your time. Thanks for taking an hour and a half of your day to spend over here.